I have been incredibly critical of RGG these past few months. If you've watched the last few videos I've made on them, you know how the alarm bells have been ringing in my head about where they were heading. The terrible corporate decisions, the retcons, the casting choices, all of it just sucked. But every time I made a video on the state of Yakuza, there were a few people in the comments that would keep telling me the same thing.
Bro, just wait for Stranger Than Heaven. That next game will blow your mind, I promise you.
I wanted to believe them, but I just couldn't. The situation felt so dire, so hopeless. I was at the point where I just didn't believe that RGG could make a comeback, that Unk don't got it no more. I was starting to come to terms that one of my favorite game studios of all time had fallen off. But, lo and behold, the new Stranger Than Heaven showcase has blown my socks off, and I cannot stop thinking about it. That trailer is one of the most masterful things I've ever seen. It's so artistic, creative, stylish, and cinematic. It felt like I was watching a movie. The color grading, the way that it ends with those transitions through the eras. RGG have not sold me on a game this much in years. I am so excited to see what they can do when they fully lean into a more serious tone of writing. I'm sure that Stranger Than Heaven will still be goofy and campy at times. That's kind of baked into RGG's DNA. But from what we've seen, it obviously looks like it's taken itself more seriously than Yakuza ever has. And as someone who's been wanting that exact tonal shift from them, this is everything I could have ever wanted. Speaking of Yakuza, Stranger Than Heaven feels insanely reminiscent of Yakuza 0 to me. Hear me out. Both of these games launched, or are launching, during times of doubt for the series, especially in the West. Yakuza 0 was the game that blew the series to new heights over here, just when Yakuza 4 and 5 were kind of flopping. And with Stranger Than Heaven, it's a very similar scenario. Like I said, I've been super critical of RGG these past few years. Their games have been dropping in quality, the company has been getting greedier, and some of the decisions about where they wanted to take Yakuza have been baffling, and the exact opposite of what people actually want from them. But with Stranger Than Heaven, I currently have no complaints. It's everything I've wanted to see from RGG since the day I started playing these games. It's gory, mature, dark, and gritty. Another similarity is that both of these games are prequels set in very interesting historical eras. 0 was obviously the 80s, during a crazy time for Japan's economy. Stranger Than Heaven takes place across 5 different eras, one of them being 1943, right in the middle of World War II. Potentially seeing the aftermath of the war on Japan is going to be huge, and I'm sure it's going to play heavily into the story and how it affects the characters. I'm so glad to see RGG experimenting like this. I feel like they've been getting way too comfortable with what they know and the types of games that they make, but Stranger Than Heaven feels like a passion project with a ton of style and thought behind it. And the final similarity between this and 0 is that both games explore ideas that would become legendary later on. 0 showed us the background of Kazuma Kiryu, the birth of the Dragon of Dojima, and the very first words uttered in the new Stranger Than Heaven trailer is Tojo Clan. Our main character Makoto is the one that's presumably going to be forming it. These humble beginnings, this historical setting, all of it is going to add so much context and impact to the Yakuza games when I go back and revisit them after Stranger Than Heaven. Overall, I feel really good about this game purely because of how zero-coded it feels. That was the game that got me and most people into this series, and I'm certain that Stranger Than Heaven is gonna do the exact same thing. It's going to appeal to the mainstream. It's gonna pull in a huge new fan base, and because it's framing itself as more serious and cinematic than Yakuza usually is, it's gonna be a perfect gateway drug into this series. Moving on, the music. It's so interesting how much this game leans into music, but it does make a lot of sense. That trailer song is still stuck in my head, that
Stranger than heaven.
I love how immediately distinct Stranger Than Heaven is, how it sets itself apart from Yakuza right from the get-go. Obviously, music goes way back further historically than movies or video games. It's one of the oldest forms of entertainment that we have, and it's a really cool attention to detail that RGG are leaning into it this hard, especially when the game spans 5 different time periods. It's gonna be really cool to see how the music shifts throughout that time. I'm also immediately curious about Makoto because he's described as musically gifted in the trailer, and I just want to see how much that plays into the main story. Is it just a sub-story thing, or is it gonna be baked into his character? Also, I assume we're gonna get karaoke still, but maybe more of a 1940s jazz club type of thing.
That would be so cool.
Here's a fun little tidbit about me. I love jazz, especially classic jazz. I'm constantly listening to it, especially when I'm working. And the fact that this game leans into that exact genre so hard, it just really excites me. RGG have always been top tier with their soundtracks. And usually I'm not that avid of a listener of video game music, but with RGG, I always make an exception. I'm really glad that they're going so hard into the music for this one when it's clearly something that they're very passionate and talented at. Now let's talk about the star of the show, the combat. What they've shown looks so dirty, so brawler-like. It still has that animated Yakuza look, but at the same time, it's more realistic and grounded. It feels like it has a lot of weight behind it. The choreography looks like actual street fights rather than, polished martial arts. This is the kind of brawler that I've been wanting to play forever, but no game has come along quite like this one that interests me right from the get-go. System-wise though, that's the crazy part. Each of Makoto's limbs is mapped to its own trigger, so the right side of his body is RB and RT, or obviously for PlayStation, R1 and R2, and the left side is vice versa, obviously. That's not Yakuza combat. That is not what RGG have ever done. This is more like a fighting game because it takes directly from Tekken. And from everything we've seen and heard, this is going to be a lot less mindless than Yakuza combat. Which, by the way, I'm not saying that Yakuza combat is bad in the slightest. I love it. But having to read your enemy's body language, time your attacks and your charge ups, block with one arm while countering with the other, it's just so much more tactical. I know this is a far cry from Stranger Than Heaven, but I really love UFC games. It's kind of a guilty pleasure of mine, and the way that this plays reminds me of it, with how dirty it is and how each limb is its own button, the way you have to read and react to your enemies, the way that you're looking for openings. That's the closest comparison that I'm familiar with. There's also a whole weapon system, and not quite like Yakuza where you're just using these temporary weapons that you find off the ground. And some of like the finishes that we've seen with these weapons, like there's one where he's stabbing a dude on the ground. It's so brutal. Welcome back, Yakuza 5. Now, I'll admit, I haven't looked into the story too much. The showcase showed off a little more than I would have liked. Not that any of it was spoilers, but there were a bit too many scenes on display for my liking, and personally, I didn't want to see all that. The casting, though, it's like super varied. There's a ton of different factions, and I've got a feeling that we'll be going through tons of different mini storylines similar to Yakuza 5, especially with each era, and the fact that we're not just fighting other Japanese factions, but the Italian mafia too. I also see that Snoop Dogg is still a sellout. I'm just kidding. And the casting for the main character being a biracial guy, just like the character that he portrays, that is perfect. That is so perfect.
I don't know if the correct term is biracial though, let me know.
Now, here are some of my concerns. Yokoyama said that the Daidoji won't be in Stranger Than Heaven, but I'm still worried that he's lying because RGG have pulled that sort of shit before. We all know how weirdly fond they've become of this faction for no apparent reason, and me, along with many others, could not care less about them. They feel so disconnected from actual Yakuza organizations and come across as very generic in comparison. Obviously, this game spans many different eras, and some of the later eras are when I think the Daidoji would have been formed in real Yakuza lore. I really hope they're not in the game, but the timelines kind of line up suspiciously well. Maybe it's just a coincidence though. I hope. I swear to God, if we see the formation of the Daidoji in this game, unless they do something genuinely really special with them, it could send this game down a few ratings for me. I hate that they just plague modern RGG. I've also seen people saying that Kiwami 3 and Pirate Yakuza were just fundraisers for Stranger Than Heaven, and maybe that's true, but that doesn't undo the horrendous choices that RGG made with those games, especially Kiwami 3 retconning events that impact the entire future of the series. You can't just excuse those games as being like stepping stones towards their real project, when those games still permanently changed the canon of a series that I've spent years investing my time into. I guess some people can excuse RGG for how mid these past few years have been, but I personally cannot. The choices that they have already made are gonna keep impacting future games, so even if Stranger Than Heaven turns out fantastic, I don't think RGG should be let off the hook just like that. They've up heavy in so many ways, and one good game doesn't erase a bunch of bad decisions. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but like I am still legitimately upset about the things they've done over the past few years. With all that said though, I feel really great about Stranger Than Heaven. I've watched the showcase so many times and it's easily one of my most anticipated games right now. This was just a quick thoughts type of video. I'll probably make another one on Stranger Than Heaven before it releases, doing a more comprehensive breakdown of my thoughts. But yeah, I really hope that RGG keep the ball rolling after this. I hope they listen to their community, the community that buys their games and lets them keep making them. Just make stuff that your people want, you know? Of course, you can have your creative liberties, but when your fans are telling you,
"No, RGG, please, we don't care about the Daidoji,"
why do you keep forcing them on us? Please don't add the Daidoji, please. Anyway, that's all from me. Do check out these two videos where I critique RGG's recent behavior, and also let me know your thoughts on Stranger Than Heaven down below. I'm gonna clock out now. See ya.